Welcome to the new Cyber Frontier, bringing you the latest news and initiatives that focus on the development of cybersecurity economics. You don't have to be a computer or cybersecurity expert to get plugged in. Your host brings it straightforward, asks the tough questions, and brings the cyber world to a level of understanding for everyone. You can find us on the web at www.newcyberfrontier.com. Now join our host as he introduces the topic for today's new Cyber Frontier.
Welcome to today's episode of New Cyber Frontier. On today with Robert Wood, who is the CISO for the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Service with the Health and Human Services. Robert, welcome. Thanks for joining today.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
We have to say something about the background. You have an authentic Batman costume. Did you wear that for Halloween?
Not this past Halloween. I pulled out my inner Jim Gordon, and my little man who's 4 really wanted to be a police officer. So we got him a uniform, put a banana in the holster, whole 9 yards, and I was rocking. My deputy is actually a former Philly cop, so he lent me a bunch of police garb and the jacket and everything. So we're rocking that. And
Did you have a badge to go with it?
I didn't. Then my wife and other son were jewel thieves.
Okay, so you had the family.
We were rocking the whole
dynamic
theme.
There. That's awesome. I'd say, yeah, the Batman though. How authentic is that? Is that like you could step into a movie or?
Oh, so it is based on the Arkham Knight video games. So if anyone's ever played those, and so I mean, it's definitely not movie quality. I mean, those are like next level. But but I mean, it's legit. I mean, it's not your Party City thing. So it weighs like 40 pounds. It's like a Kevlar vest. Like,
that's awesome.
You don't want to wear it for too long because it definitely does not breathe. You are not doing anything extravagant in it except looking cool. So, but I mean, I've rocked it out at the movies when I was living in San Francisco. I've done Halloweens in it. I've made appearances here and there, and it's always a lot of fun whenever you wear it because people are just like, "What is happening right now?" Like, this is awesome.
Yeah,
lots of selfies.
Awesome. So we're enough about movies and Batman, but cybersecurity. Tell us what you do and how you got into what you're doing in cybersecurity.
Yeah. So right now I'm the CISO at CMS, or the Centers for Medicare Medicaid Services. And this is actually my first federal role. So I've been here just over a year now. I joined last November. And prior to that, I was leading security programs at a couple of tech startups. So in healthcare, cybersecurity, and digital marketing, respectively. That was kind of my tour through the startup scene. And prior to that, I was at 2 different consultancies, Cigital, and then a much more boutique consultancy is where I got my start. And it's been awesome. So my sort of journey through security has been amazing because, starting off in consulting, you get this fun dynamic of just getting to work on everything you want. Like if you say yes to it and you have the time and the patience to learn it, they'll give you the work. And so I did that, and I just kind of drank from the fire hose of security for the entire start of my career, and did some amazing things. Everything from helping huge banks build pen test programs and sort of rebuild them from the ground up, to working on video game console hacking, to working on cell phones and base station hacking, to huge static code analysis and threat modeling of systems that run international stock markets. And it's just cool stuff. So you sort of build all these mental models that you can take with you as you go out into the rest of the world. And that served me very well once I started, once I switched over to a totally different role of trying to build and manage security programs and teams inside of startups. And so my role has always been a little bit more hands-on. And so this current role is a little funky for me because the org is, of course, much, much, much bigger than anything that I've prior that I've worked in directly prior to, except for consulting with some of the big Fortune whatevers at Cigital. But the way that I kind of balance my time is just it's different but exciting nonetheless.
That is interesting. We'll have to unpack that when we get back from the break. We want to talk about the transformation from startup and small to government. Be right back.
Yeah.
Blockframe technology offers next-generation blockchain managed trust and security. Unique non-fungible tokens are used to secure software bills of materials to provide data quality and security for every transaction in your supply chain. Deploy advanced peer-to-peer product security, scale zero trust capability to millions of IoT devices, allow vendor tracking and accountability, and rapidly reset from compromise. Unchangeable, time-sequenced blockchain data provides next-generation security using machine learning trust algorithms and audit analytics. Start securing your supply chain today by contacting Blockframe at www.blockframetech.com.
Welcome back to New Cyber Frontier. On today with Robert Wood, the CISO of the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. We were talking before the break about how you've been there for about a year, but your background before that was in faster moving, which I've heard from you several times that the government's a little slow. We need faster moving will be better. So tell us about that contrast and how you made that transition and how you see both sides have good, bad, ugly, different. Tell us about the contrast.
Yeah. So honestly, like this role has been, it's not without its challenges for sure, but it's honestly been amazing. And I think like the way that I would sort of liken it, if I could use a metaphor, is, working at CMS, we're, I think, the largest health payer in the world. And so it's as opposed to working at a healthcare startup that's doing similar kinds of things. It's like driving one of those little, one of those little speedboats that, the Navy SEALs use for their missions versus steering like the aircraft carrier. And, we have a lot more momentum in what we're doing here. But I will say when you sort of cut through some of the red tape and you're intentional around team design and pulling the right people together, and you just work with a little hustle and find the right players and get them together, like things can move fast. Like we've had a couple of projects lately that, I mean, we went from idea to something running in production, like an MVP, minimum viable product running in production in a matter of like a couple of months, which is on par with what you'd expect in a startup like environment. I think the biggest difference, at least this is my working hypothesis after only a year, is there's so much more dependency inside the government. You're reaching across all these other, maybe even to other agencies. You're reaching to other centers in CMS's case or other offices. And so like the farther you have to reach, the harder it is to get something done. And that goes for whether you're going through procurement to, bring in a new team or a new technology or something like that, to hiring, to policy making, stuff like that. So that I think is like the biggest challenge. And if you can bring people together so they're closer, so you're not reaching as far, things inevitably end up moving a lot faster. And so like that's I think one of the little hacks, if you will, the bureaucracy hacks that I've like really started to lean into, is like anything that we can do to like shorten the distance. It's like pouring lighter fluid on an effort. And I mentioned this before, but like the time spent in government thus far has been awesome. Like, been having a lot of fun. Like the problems that we face and that we're wrestling through are just like the scale and the complexity of them are unlike anything I've gotten exposure to at the startup scene. And so, you have these like big, bold ideas in startups that you're trying to sort of experiment your way through, and sort of blending that like taking that mindset into the federal setting has just been a lot of fun because, we have these big problems. Let's pull some ideas together and let's try to rapidly test and experiment and learn our way through them and see what works, and then turn the scale fuel up if it happens to start taking hold.
Yeah. So I'm not as familiar with the mission there at HHS. Can you explain what it is that you're accomplishing and doing for the government for people that just might not be familiar with that department?
Yeah, sure. So HHS is probably the primary. So EMS is what's referred to as an operating division under HHS. So similar to like DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, CISA is a part of that. Mm-hmm. The Army is a part of DoD. So HHS is probably like the most notable sort of healthcare umbrella focused agency, cabinet level agency across the federal government. So other operating divisions include FDA, CDC, NIH, all fairly household names, especially in times of COVID. We've heard about guidance coming out of FDA and CDC constantly, and so CMS it's like the gorilla that nobody really knows about in a lot of ways. So a couple of major programs that fall under us: so Medicare, Medicaid, and something called CHIP, the Childhood Insurance Program. And it's effectively what we do is handle payments and accessibility or eligibility rather for insurance for some of the most vulnerable peoples across America. So your elderly, those who are going through a hard time in any kind of impoverished situation, and children. And we also do some amount of hospital claims sort of interfacing, but that's a smaller part of our overall mission. The big bread and butter stuff is managing the Medicare Medicaid programs. So
a lot of logistics of payment structures is what I'm hearing is under your kind of wing. Okay. Interesting. Have you looked at, if you look at where that's going in the future, I'm just curious. I work a lot in blockchain, AI, healthcare. I think that's actually how we got connected. Do you see that that technology is something that might be leveraged in where you're at?
I don't know, to be honest. It's I think it's possible that it might be leveraged at the kind of at the edges of what we do, or maybe as an interface to what we do. I'm not so sure about how the core properties of how we handle and move money around, how that might change and evolve over time. It's a little bit of just an open question. It's certainly possible. There's a lot of active experimentation around machine learning and what data scientists can do for us when we have better co-located normalized data. And that's all exciting. But I'm not a huge fan of trying to predict the future, because especially in this field, things change so fast that, mm-hmm. 5 years ago in the government, nobody was talking about Kubernetes, and now it's now it's a thing, and it's taking hold, and it's a part of world conversation. And so, a strong maybe.
Interesting. Yeah. I work a lot with the state of Colorado, and Medicaid in Colorado was one of the programs they evaluated, saying, hey, if we'd use distributed ledger for tracking the payments, there's a forensics capability that there seems to be a large, I won't say fraud, but missing pieces or unmanaged payments, and a lot of money involved. I think there was $100 million in an audit.
Oh, yeah.
That could be collected if they could get that more manageable as far as how the payments were tracked.
Yeah. And I will say, there's as far as that machine learning and different approaches to solve fraud management is a really good use case in this case, or in this discussion, because the data is already there. Mm-hmm. You have all this historical data that you can analyze and sort of tease out what is what's maybe fraud, what's not. It's like ripe proving ground for maybe training models. And you can use that to infer, susceptibility for fraud or potential for fraud on future payments. And you can combine that with, source and destination of the payment, the individuals involved, or any number of factors, right? And that's a really interesting use case. And I know of like multiple active efforts underway right now geared towards like machine learning model development and testing in that capacity at CMS at the moment. So like it's exciting times.
Yeah, interesting. Well, let's take a break right here from our sponsors. Be right back.
Blockframe Technology offers next-generation blockchain managed trust and security. Unique non-fungible tokens are used to secure software bills of materials to provide data quality and security for every transaction in your supply chain. Deploy advanced peer-to-peer product security, scale zero trust capability to millions of IoT devices, allow vendor tracking and accountability, and rapidly reset from compromise. Unchangeable, time-sequenced blockchain data provides next-generation security using machine learning trust algorithms and audit analytics. Start securing your supply chain today by contacting Blockframe at www.blockframetech.com.
Welcome back to New Cyber Frontier. On today with Robert Wood, the CISO for the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services under the Health and Human Services. So, before the break, we were into, what the future looks like, what new tech looks like, what your thoughts are. But let's talk about your day-to-day. What is it that you work with, maybe your top couple challenges and things that you run into on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I spend a lot of my day focused on people, focused on trying to help people, act as a sounding board for folks as they, think through things. Sometimes folks come to me for decisions, or they want my input on a decision. Sometimes it's just about like trying to help them like clear out roadblocks. So I am a big advocate for people not struggling in silence. And so, basic practices like, running stand-ups and, quick escalation to get help if you need it, like the andon cord in Toyota factories, like that, taking that kind of approach to what we do. So if you start to, come up against a roadblock and you have any sort of confidence that it's going to be a pain to manage, like pull the andon cord, like let's get it resolved right now. And like, let's just keep you moving. Because that's where people are, adding value, is when they're actually like moving the ball forward. So I spend a lot of my time sort of in that capacity. A lot of it is also spent working at this like strategic plan level. And so it's like our strategy doesn't, it is dynamic, but it's not, changing on a daily basis. But a lot of it is like trying to find and seek ways to better measure it, to better communicate it, to or actively communicating it to other people. It's in this role, you're kind of like a chief repeating officer, and you have to say something about 4,000 times as something, and eventually it'll start to sink in, like the like your vision, your plan, your connection points. Because all this stuff is of course perfectly clear in my head, and how these things fit together, or at least mostly clear. And, I look at it as my job to help other people understand how those dots connect, why they should connect, and why we should be spending any amount of time doing them. And then the last thing, of course, like in any cybersecurity role, like fires happen, fires come up, issues come up, and you got to deal with them when they come up. It's, it's the inevitability. There's, some kind of like suspicious incident. There's an HR thing. There's procurement snag, like whatever it is, those things will pop up, and you have to nip them in the butt.
Yeah. So, when we talked about your startup background, and you just talked about that mentality you're bringing in of, come when there's a problem, don't sit on it. How, you've been there a year. Have you seen metrics improving from having more of a rapid response type of thought process there?
Yeah, I think we have. So we do a few things to try to measure that. So one of those is like regular pulse surveys, and that's trying to get at least a sample set representation that gives us some kind of quantitative data around how things are going, how people are feeling. So there's questions in there around like that would give us an NPS score for the security team. There's questions in there around utility or usefulness of particular efforts like pen testing or system ATOs or whatever it is, consultations that people might get. There's sort of yes, no feelings around like how easy it is to get what you need, how easy it is to find certain things. So it's a relatively short contained survey, but doing that and sort of like measuring the trends over time has, I think, been useful. I also do a lot of sort of like individual or small team kind of touch bases, either with people outside our group, people inside our group. And one thing that I've heard sort of like a through line in a lot of these cases is security's always been very difficult to engage with. Not difficult in the sense that like people are combative or anything. I mean, sometimes security people are combative. You know, part of our charm is the abrasiveness. But we can talk about that in a second. But but that it's actually like hard to get in touch with the security team, and so like I try to be very, very intentional around like I'm in all the Slack channels that other people are in. People know that they can message me anytime and I will like personally respond. You know, I don't have somebody like ghostwriting my Slack responses. I'll send people like individual like Loom videos to try to like, you know, give them, you know, exactly what we're getting right now. Like, you know, the FaceTime, if you will. I do, you know, a lot of one-on-ones with people. I take people out to lunch, out to coffee, you know, things like that. And, you know, the thing that I've heard is like, just that greater emphasis on accessibility and transparency is like a total night and day shift from the way that things were, because, you know, people are just like, they're trying to get their jobs done, right? Whether they're in security or not, they're just trying to, like, everyone's trying to do their job, do what they're hired for. And if you're in the government, you know, you're trying to positively contribute to the mission. And if you don't know, like, security is potentially a major blocker or a major enabler. And if there's all this like ambiguity that you don't understand and you can't find the means to remove the ambiguity, then like that's frustrating, and it just creates this kind of churn and anxiety and all that. So just the fact that we're like really leaning in on the culture change and making ourselves more accessible. You know, I wrote a chat bot recently because people are like, hey, it's hard to like find the answers to certain questions and yada, yada, yada. And we're like talking to people about creating this multi-$100,000 chatbot, et cetera, et cetera. And so I took a couple of weekends and I made one, and it's running in places, answering questions. And it's like, okay, like we're just going to, everyone, you know, rolls up their sleeves and does their thing. We're just going to like collectively move this ball forward. Like I'm not above or below any work, and nobody else is either. So I think like that's been really helpful. And I think the data in thing, like the qualitative data we get from just discussions, personal discussions, and the quantitative data we get from metrics and just like seeing turnaround time and progress made on OKRs and the NPS scores, like that stuff is trending in the right direction.
Yeah. You had said culture was kind of your biggest pain point. Is this what you're talking about, that this way it was before was a problem and the shift is helping? Or is there other areas in culture that you feel that pain point?
Yeah, well, and I should clarify that it's not that like anything, like nobody was like doing anything wrong or anything like that in like in the before Rob times, but it's more that there's this. I mean, especially in the federal government, really in any regulated industry, there's a sense of like conservative thinking that you know, we have to make sure we do things in a compliant way, and we do. That's important, but I think there's a tendency to like doing things the compliant way means slowing down and like really looking at them and getting eyes on everything. And and there hasn't been this acceptance yet of iteration speed and continuous delivery and how that can actually like make things safer. And so there's a lot of, well, and I should say it's natural for, you just kind of, you end up doing things for a certain amount of time. And there's this escalation of commitment that, I'm doing the right thing. I'm going to continue to do the right thing. There's groupthink that happens as people start to, they work together over a certain point in time where it's harder for fresh ideas to just like magically emerge. Mm-hmm. There's a sense of like psychological safety that I think is like, I don't think we have a great sense of psychological safety right now as a security community inside CMS. Mm-hmm. And that's something I'm like very keenly interested in helping improve. So like anyone can feel like they can speak up and say, you're wrong. And here's why I think you're wrong. And I like that's starting to happen more and more. Like, I try to celebrate people when they call me out on anything and like in big public channels, because I don't want to be wrong. Like I want to be right all the time. And I know I'm not. And so those are the kind of like things, like trying to break down those little, and it's because it's not a binary thing. It's sort of like all this stuff exists on a big spectrum.
Yeah.
And so trying to find ways to influence and improve those pockets of things in teams, in individual people. Gotcha. Like that's, it's organic growth.
You said you had, the government follows a lot of compliance, but yet compliance might not mean if you spend all the time in compliance that it works anyway. So you said you had some issues with FedRAMP. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I've noticed this tendency to, so FedRAMP is typically applied to software as a service or cloud services, right? So think, Dropbox, Box, Google Workspace, Office 365, that kind of stuff. And I've noticed this tendency, it's just a subjective thing that I've picked up on in conversation with people that, okay, team A wants to use this SaaS tool. Is it FedRAMP? Is it not? Okay, it's FedRAMP. We're good to go. Like it's safe. All right. Like tell them it's okay. And then the conversation just kind of stops. Mm-hmm. And that I think is it's like FedRAMP is doing exactly what it meant to do, what it's supposed to do. But the sort of mental implications that it sort of has. I mean, I think FedRAMP, like, and the GSA office, I should say, like they're making some big strides on like improving the throughput of organizations that can get FedRAMP accredited. Like we're working with this small team from them on this 10x project that's super exciting. It's all like OSCOL verified security documentation and stuff like that. Very, very cool stuff that'll like really help kind of grease the skids. But circling back, the implication, or like the mental implication of thinking like I'm using this thing that has gone through FedRAMP accreditation and therefore it's all going to be okay, I think is a real shortcoming, because if you're to break the risk out into two separate categories, the first being, is the thing built securely and compliantly? And the second part being, am I using it and integrating it in a safe and secure way? Mm-hmm. And FedRAMP only focuses on this side, not on this side.
Yeah.
And if you just kind of come down this hypothetical scenario and just split that risk 50-50, FedRAMP, even if it does everything perfect and it catches all the issues, which nothing does, but catches all the issues that you could possibly catch in a secure, compliant product or company, you're only catching 50% of that risk. And so you have to focus on that other 50% to sort of create this more holistic sense of risk management. So, how are people logging into it? How are you going to remove people from it when it's no longer needed? What data is going to go into it? How do you integrate it into other things? So like, you don't want you may not want like an application that isn't rated like FedRAMP high or rated for your most sensitive data connecting to something that has all your most sensitive data, for example. But if you just focus on that first 50%, you're never going to end up having that conversation. And that I think that's a shortcoming of this thinking that goes into
the reliance on its
compliance.
It's compliant. So I don't have to I don't think about it. So it's almost that ties in with that cultural thing that, understanding that compliance gets you part way. Now there's the application of it.
Right. And I think and that's a hard leap to make for many people. And partially because there's been so much emphasis put on, resource allocation in support of doing those compliance activities. And so, naturally that's where people's focus has been, your focus goes where your time and your money goes. Right. Yeah. And, or your focus is where your time and your money goes. And so, if that's where all your resources are going primarily, then naturally that's the kind of thing that you're going to end up sort of leaning on and talking about and all of that. And so, making sure that as we look at our budget, that it's distributed in the way, in the things that are actually meaningful to us and to me and my deputy and our leadership team, that. You're just doing that is also positively changing and influencing the conversation in a really meaningful way, I think.
Yeah, interesting. So we're kind of running to the end of our time, but in closing, anything you'd like to get out to our listeners about, either your needs or what you're doing or things they, say, hey, this is something I think everybody should know.
Yeah, I think, the thing I think any security person should really take to heart, whether they're on my team or another federal agency or just out in the industry, is you as the security person need to meet people where they're at. You need to approach your job with empathy for what other people are going through, what other teams are going through. So, there's so much talk that we kind of, we put out so much around, I'm going to use phishing and social engineering as an example, screen all your emails, check for this, check for that, who's the sender, what's the link look like, blah, blah, blah. And, let's say on average, all those things, even if you're good at it, might take 60 seconds per email. And if you're getting 100, 200 plus emails a day, that's an enormous amount of time that you're asking people to add to their workload. And they're not getting paid for any of that extra time. It's actually it might be adding negative value in some ways for them, maybe not for you as a security person. And so, I've gotten into a lot of deep conversations around this thing in particular. It's what can we do as a security team to think about that user experience and the flow that a malicious email might take to get into a user's inbox? And how can we decrease the cognitive load for that end user? How can we get rid of stuff before it ever reaches there? How can we make it so you can't send your credentials, to single sign-on or Active Directory or what have you, to a site like an unapproved site? How can we make it so it's much less likely that any malicious attachments are going to make it through and compromise your system? All that stuff. If we don't have to put this kind of training burden on everyone and remove some of the easy stuff wherever we possibly can and focus instead on the things that actually matter, then I think that builds trust with the other individual that they know we're not just asking the world of them, and that we actually care about their own struggles and their own sort of work experiences.
What's important to their workload. Yeah,
exactly. And I think you could apply that to software development. You could apply it to IT operations. You could apply it to legal and contract. You can apply it to just about every aspect of what we do as an industry. And I think I think every security professional needs to take that to heart, that we need more empathy in our jobs and in what we do, and that applies to all the conversations you have. The projects you take on, the things that you design, the policies you have, all of that stuff. Try to lean into that.
All right. Well, thanks. That's a good note to end on. And you heard it here today on New Cyber Frontier. Thanks for joining.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of New Cyber Frontier. Remember to get involved. Often we think that someone else will handle privacy and security in the virtual world, but you are the only one truly in command of your virtual fate. Join our mailing list so we can keep you informed of breaking news and new releases. If you have an idea, if you have a question that you would like to hear answered, or if you want to get involved with our efforts, reach out to us at newcyberfrontier.com. We also encourage you to visit our sponsors' links, as they are the ones that really make this show possible. I want to thank each of you for supporting the show, and we look forward to seeing you back for the next episode of New Cyber Frontier.